Hey everybody, welcome to our species spotlight on Anubias. Anubias is a genus of plants, both aquatic and semi-aquatic flowering plants that belong to the family Araceae. They are naturally distributed from tropical central through to Western Africa. And the type of natural habitat that they're typically found in are smaller rivers and streams, as well as marshy areas where they can be found in lower light type environments. Okay, so now we're going to get into some of the details on keeping Anubias in your aquarium, as well as details on the plant itself. There are 15 different species of Anubias, 22 if you would want to include the variations of them. Some of the species names that we're typically familiar with are names like Cognensis, Hastifolia, Undulatus, Nana, Gigantea, for example. The size of aquarium that you want to provide these plants with really depends on the species you're keeping. Obviously, Gigantea would require a much larger tank, at least 50, 60 gallons. Anubias do very well in, all the way down to smaller desktop type tanks. Now, when it comes to attaching these plants, they have a rhizome. They don't actually have a kind of a root structure that's actively involved in feeding the plant. The rhizome grows lengthwise. It's a long kind of tube, and there's little roots that emanate from it. The roots really affix the plant to give it stability on the surface, while the rhizome grows and allows the colony to spread. You can separate the rhizome to plant colonies elsewhere, and you can attach it typically using things like crazy glue or monofilament fishing line or lead weights, for example. Plant weights can be used. I personally prefer just to gently coax the rhizome into some nooks and crannies in the rock and woodwork. That typically is fine as well. The plants do take in their nutrition mostly through the water column. The positioning for these plants is really best under within the shade of taller plants or decorative structure, for example. They are a lower light type plant in general. The leaf variation shape dependent on the species can vary all the way from rounder shapes to more spade-like looks to more elongated types of leaves. So there's really quite a bit of variation in shape. Coloration is generally always a darker, rich green color, with the exception of course, the variegated types. We consider them to be a great species for beginners. They do tolerate a wide variety of water conditions. They're hardy. And they do well with fish that can be often a little bit tougher on more fine leaved plants or more delicate leaf plants. No problem in keeping with fish like that. And last but not least is the fact that they're a great choice for low-tech type setups. They are not very demanding in terms of equipment that you need to keep them. And so they generally make a good choice in that regard too. Now, when it comes to water conditions and keeping Anubias, they do tolerate a fairly wide range of conditions, but what is important is that the water chemistry is relatively consistent. So pH should be somewhere between 6.5 and 7.5 degrees of hardness, between about 3 and 12 degrees. And the water temperature is 72 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit or 22 to 28 degrees Celsius. Now, when it comes to feeding Anubias plant species, it's pretty simple. They are, as I had mentioned before, a plant that takes in nutrients via the water column for the most part. So, being as the root structure is really involved much more in keeping the plant stable and affixed in its positioning. When it comes to a liquid nutrient supplement, the best way to do it is really take the weekly dose, divide it in 2 or 3, and use that smaller amount a couple times a week versus 1 time a week when you're feeding these plants. CO2, while not necessary, at a minimal rate, constant rate, is actually a good thing for them, given their preference to take in nutrition via the water column. In summary, we find the Anubias to be a great plant for all aquarium keepers. They're easy to propagate, easy to take, cuttings from or sections of rhizome from one tank to the other without any problem. They are easily kept with fish that can be a little tougher on more delicately leaved plants. And they are really interesting in that the rhizome, being how you attach them to decorative surfaces, allows for really interesting groupings and shapes of colonies of these plants based on that fact. So all around, we really do love Anubias. Great plant for both beginners and the advanced aquascaper as well. You really should be keeping some in your tank if you're into keeping plants. Until the next time, guys. And oh, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. Until the next time.